This year's program is devoted to an examination of hate at various levels, both nationally and in our own lives. What can be done about it, and why we must all assess our own conduct. I believe our program is timely and relevant as we move forward in 2020, which threatens to continue and even amplify the heated discourse of public issues in our forthcoming elections, and where hatred continues to manifest itself in deadly incidents at locales throughout our country. A synagogue in Pittsburgh, a kosher store in Jersey City, an off-campus party at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, a church in Texas, the streets of Williamsburg. I could go on and on, but we are now facing an uprising of hate incidents in this country that are really at an intolerable level. But while we look at that phenomenon and in our minds look at it a problem that we have dissociated ourselves from, the purpose of this program is to talk about hate in all its forms. And I will posit with you that hate is consistently destructive, both nationally and in our own lives, and is differentiated only by its intensity and degree, because these incidents are not the only places in our society where there is the presence of hate. And I will tell each and every one of you, and I include myself, none of us are outside the realm of responsibility here, and I'll explain what I mean. I want to begin, though, with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, and this is the quote that sort of took our attention this year to make this program focused on the subject matter I just told you about. Hate and violence solve nothing. They only serve to push us deeper and deeper into the mire. Violence begets violence, hate begets hate, and toughness begets greater toughness. It is all a descending spiral, and the end is destruction for everybody. Along the way of life, someone must have enough sense and morality to cut off the chain of hate by projecting the ethics of love into the center of our lives. It took me 15 years to realize that that is the essence of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. The essence is rejecting hate in favor of love. And I'm going to declare for all of you tonight, I've been doing this for 15 years and I've never said this, but I'm going to declare for all of you tonight that I love you. I love each and every one of you. I love you because you are in the image of the God in which I believe. I love you because you're my fellow citizens, and we are bound together by pre-political values that make us citizens, Americans. And although we may fall short at times, we are bound by these values, and the values themselves are transcendent and the closest, in my view, that humankind has ever come to God in creating a representative government. I love you because each of you has a story full of triumphs and tribulations, joys and sorrows that have brought you to this day. I love you because the values in which I believe and for which I pray every week in the sanctuary are also present in your churches. And the hand-holding and the hugs that were given to me 2 Sundays ago at Second Baptist when I joined you for worship, and last Sunday at Living Word Christian Fellowship when I joined you for worship, makes me realize that you love me as well. Political divisiveness is too often spawned by hate and is corrosive, whether or not recognized or intended. In these instances, we have lost faith in each other. And in this area, we have lost faith in ourselves. Why do I say that? Because if I label you an idiot, I don't have to consider anything you say. I have spared myself the task of explaining my own views and of possibly finding that I have no answers to valid points you have raised. I have avoided having to listen to you and the resultant discomfort of submitting my views to critique. This technique is a sign of weakness, not strength, an admission of how little faith I would have in the correctness of what I say in those circumstances. Why do we utilize this technique? Human nature, a desire to be right at any cost, mental laziness, avoidance of discomfort in critique, protection of views that we have adopted so long ago and have ceased to analyze or update because they have become part of who we are, which results in a we versus they mentality where I must win or I will lose myself. Whatever the reasons, the widespread use of this technique has morphed into perpetual conflict and stagnation, defeating progress in favor of chaos and an apathetic acceptance that this condition must be. But Dr. King did not seek to vanquish the opponents to civil rights. He sought to convince them that civil rights were the destiny of America, and he did it through ethical persuasion. Listen to the August 28, 1963, I Have a Dream speech, which I'm not going to do in whole. We have somebody far greater than me to do it. But I want you to listen to these words. Dr. King says, "Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the higher plane of dignity and discipline. I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. That one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Dr. King understood that hate transforms into ugliness, that in hating, we become the problem, not the solution. He saw what hate did to the personalities and souls of those it infected, and Dr. King did not want to bear that burden. I have a story tonight for you. It's the story of Sergeant Isaac Woodard, and I have another story. It's the story of Justice or Judge J. Wadding Waris. The destructive forces of hatred can be illustrated by the stories of Sergeant Isaac Woodard and Judge J. Wallace Waring. On February 12, 1946, the day he was discharged from the Army after 3 years of honorable service in World War II, Sergeant Woodard, an African-American still dressed in his Army uniform, was headed home on a bus with other black and white soldiers proceeding through the small towns of rural South Carolina. At one stop, the sergeant asked the bus driver to delay the departure a few minutes so that he could use the toilet facilities. The bus driver initially refused this request in violation of company policy, which led to an exchange of words, after which the driver relented. The exchange of words were Sergeant Woodard saying to the bus driver, "Don't curse at me. Talk to me like I'm talking to you. I am a man just like you." Woodard left the bus to utilize the facility and returned within a few minutes without further incident. At the next stop, however, the bus driver left the bus and made a complaint to the local police, demanding that Woodard be removed from the bus and arrested. And Linwood Shull, the police chief of a 2-man force in Batesville, South Carolina, was only too happy to comply by placing Woodard under arrest. On the way to the lockup at police headquarters, several blocks away, Shull viciously beat Woodard with a blackjack around the face and head, completing this punishment by forcefully and repeatedly poking Woodard in each eye with the end of the blackjack, multiple times. And in the course of this brutal punishment, Woodard was permanently blinded. Due to a nationwide public relations campaign proclaiming this injustice and demands to the U.S. Justice Department to investigate the matter and prosecute the person responsible for brutally injuring Woodard, Shull was criminally charged with violating Woodard's civil rights. and brought to trial in the Charleston, South Carolina Federal District Court, over which Judge J. Waters Waring presided. Despite his obvious guilt, however, Shull was acquitted by a white jury. Judge Waring, who was an eighth-generation South Carolinian, not a noted civil rights exponent, not somebody who wanted to upset the apple cart about racism in the South. He was highly suspicious of an aggressive federal role in enforcing civil rights, and he had never questioned either segregation or denying blacks the right to vote. But when this trial ended the way it did, with the obvious guilt of Shull and the acquittal on a racist basis, Judge Waring was both shocked and awakened. This caused the judge and his wife to embark upon a rigorous journey of study and introspection, from which the judge emerged convinced that he must effect sweeping changes under law through his rulings. In doing so, the judge became a pariah within his community, but a national symbol of justice. Through a series of rulings, he ultimately engineered the presentation of the Brown versus Board of Education case before the United States Supreme Court, which rejected the separate but equal doctrine in public school education on the basis of Judge Waring's rulings below. In many respects, Sergeant Woodard and Judge Waring, who in effect got rid of the separate but equal doctrine that afflicted education in this country for Black Americans, they, at one time national figures, have been subsequently forgotten, but we can't forget that they set the stage for Dr. King. The stories of Sergeant Woodard and Judge Waters Waring are both relevant and instructive, appallingly shocking and singularly inspiring. On the one hand, the blinding of Sergeant Woodard is the product of a naked hate so jarring that no matter one's political views, uniform agreement can be instantly reached under current standards that it was absolutely and irredeemably unacceptable. This is what is known as a shared fact, which performs the same function as a fully accepted theorem in geometry. It is a given that is accepted without further analysis and which can be built upon to reach other conclusions. On the other hand, Judge Waring's personal journey and his courageous decision to apply the law to combat racial injustice stands as an example that each of us can make a difference and that a consensus of what is right can be achieved through leadership, education, communication, and where necessary, groundbreaking judicial rulings. Ultimately, a sufficient consensus can be established, which then leads to additional court rulings, legislation, and perhaps, more importantly, the willingness of people to follow and implement what is right. In this regard, Judge Waring's approach are the reactions to it, both pro and con, comprise a case study in how progress can be achieved and how it may lead to additional shared facts for the betterment of our local and national communities. The issue becomes, though, what are we doing today? We have to examine the level of political discourse in this country. Where does political discourse come from? It comes from us. It comes from the leaders that we elect. Can we shed the trappings of hate and get beyond our differences and find sufficient commonality to work together on addressing objective needs within our community, our region, and our country? The answer here can be yes, but it requires us to recognize and recapture the shared values on which our nation is based. It requires us to remember that we should love one another, that we should respect one another, that the other person has something to say, and that our views, no matter how strongly held, need to be examined and re-examined in a search for the truth. We are not talking about the sacrifice of anyone's principles. I'm not telling you to give up your beliefs. I am telling you to keep them examined and to listen to the other guy and to interact in a civil fashion so that true discussion can occur and that we can search for the truth and do the right thing, and to recognize that we don't have to win at all costs. Benjamin Franklin said that politics is the art of compromise. There can be no compromise when there is no discussion. There can be no progress when all we have is stagnation and opposition. Our country deserves better. It deserves better from us. It deserves better from our leaders. And it requires a recognition and a reawakening as to what is required to really be in this democracy. Dr. King, he understood, he knew, and he believed. He understood that it's about faith. Faith in God, faith in yourself, faith in each other. Faith in ourselves that we can discern what is right and explain our position in lucid terms. Faith in each other that we have retained sufficient characteristics to be admired and respected by even those with whom we may disagree. And faith in our country that our founding principles are strong enough to get us through each challenge. And let's not forget about compassion. Compassion to care enough to seek participation with those with whom we disagree, as opposed to vanquishing them. That's not what Dr. King is about. That's not what we should be about. In this program, we have people more intelligent, more introspective, more learned than me, who will present various aspects of these topics. From our Rabbi Schonbrun, Aaron Schonbrun, will be talking about the bonds that we have as citizens and how that should impact on how we react to one another, and maybe a few other topics he throws in as well. We're going to have Pastor Miller, who will talk about antipathy and also apathy, because apathy sets in when we believe that what is now is the way it has to be. It doesn't have to be that way, and Pastor Miller will tell us that. And lastly, Dr. Warner, who will recite the Dr. Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech, but also talk about what we can really do if we forget about ideological boundaries, if we forget about trying to win at all costs, and if we regard what is necessary to be done and join hands to do it. Joining hands just the way we joined hands at Second Baptist. Hugging each other just the way we hugged each other at Living Word Christian Fellowship. I have a Jewish barber who is Russian-born. He's a very wise man. A lot of times he talks to me about Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah. When I told him what my experience was at this temple, praying for certain values on Saturday, and then going on these successive Sundays to each of these churches and saw the same values, irrespective of differences in theology, the same values being taught and prayed for. You know what he said to me? He said, if we could do this on a larger scale, this country would have no problems. At least not problems about us dealing with one another. And Yuri is a wise man.